Hi guys, good to see you, although under grim circumstances, grim news, certainly sad news. I have gone through the press conference that's just come out now. We'll talk a little bit about that a bit later on. I've kind of got a whole program, all sorts of notes and so on to go through. So I want to kind of get through that. We also are potentially going to have a guest on. Terry will probably be joining us a little bit later. And then there's also the press conference that Adventures with Purpose gave. We also want to kind of refer to that. So I kind of want to deal with my stuff, dealing with the Kylie Rodni case, and then kind of come back to the law enforcement side and the search side, and also you guys. But the question we're really asking right now is who is responsible? It's another way of saying who's to blame, right? And I've got to say, we often put polls on. We often put polls on the channel in chat, and I don't know if I can remember it ever being 50-50. Like right now, over 200 of you have voted 50-50 saying, is someone else still responsible? So obviously the question did come up during the press conference, is there foul play? And when will the toxicology come out? When will the autopsy come out? Crystal Ogburn asked a question, how did Sammy talk to her 12:36? That's certainly a question I've got. Is that an error in terms of the timeline? It is a question. So there are still some questions we need to get answers to. Stephanie says, only here for a few minutes, but wanted to say hello. Good to see you here. Timmy, I am going to have to put you down. It's just a little bit difficult to get through this. Okay, so would you guys like me to, whoa. Yeah, so there it's doing that thing again. I'm a little bit out of focus. Let's see what happens if I do this. There we go. Do you guys want me to respond to the press conference first, or do you guys want me to kind of get going? Have you guys watched the press conference? Yeah, Pauline says no mention of her phone. That's a question I would have asked at the press conference. Did you find her phone? But there were questions like, was anyone else found there, and things like that. Gina says yes, please. Okay, so I'm going to quickly respond to it, and then we'll come back to it a little bit later. So there was a question. Maybe I should just bring up just maybe that. I'm not going to play it. I'm just going to show it to you. Let's just do that. So during this press conference, the question came up, was there an abduction, or why was it said that there was an abduction? And then they said, well, they never actually said there was or there wasn't, right? Do you remember that? And that reminds me of what Kylie's mother said. Kylie's mother said the following. They've changed it to an abduction, which makes me feel validated. My daughter is not the runaway type, right? And so to be honest, when I first heard that, I thought that was a very weird thing to say. I feel validated because they're saying it's an abduction, almost like I'm relieved that it's an abduction. You could almost prefer it being a runaway, because then you could still find her. But then I guess you'd point the finger of blame at her mother and say, wow, why did you run away from home? But it was quite interesting the way the authorities said, we never said it was an abduction. Also, we never said it wasn't. I've got to say, I kind of felt the same. I felt I don't think it's an abduction, but I also don't know whether one can say with absolute certainty that it's not, kind of thing. Just the way everything was sort of disappeared, it was like, wow, it feels like something's been covered up, doesn't it? But at the same time, the way her phone went off so quickly was also a weird thing. I mean, it's a very quick abduction, 3 minutes after everyone leaves the party, kind of thing. Another question that was asked was there foul play? And this is what I found quite interesting, was the person who came forward said, well, we're investigating this as a traffic collision investigation. That tells you quite a lot. It's not being investigated as a homicide. It's not being investigated, in that sort of sense, or you know what I'm saying? It's investigated as a traffic collision investigation. Something else that came out, the autopsy scheduled for tomorrow, and toxicology is going to take 4 to 6 weeks. So this question of was she intoxicated, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks to get some kind of answer out of that. So we'll see what that is. There was also just a straight out question, is there foul play? The answer was no comment. There was another quite good question, did rain wash away the tire marks? That's something that I've really wanted to deal with in terms of my number 2, 3, 4 clue. But what is quite interesting with that is I know for a fact that there was no rain the night of the 5th of August. So the only way to have arrived at the campsite the next morning with the marks washed away is if there had been rain that day. And from what I've seen, there wasn't any rain. It's very important to look at things like that. Another thing that was just curious was someone asked, did Adventures with Purpose call law enforcement? And they kind of said, maybe, but I thought that was quite strange. The person giving I think it was Captain Brown, the person giving the press, handling that question, said he learned of the discovery on social media. He wasn't like, he didn't get a call, which I thought was interesting. So we're going to kind of come back to some of this a little bit later. What I want to do now is deal with this question of responsibility. So let's just bring up this picture. So are you guys clear where exactly this happened? This is one of the better pictures, but you can see, let's just make it a bit bigger here. You can see how long that road actually is before it goes out. It's quite a long road, and that one could imagine that you could speed up quite a bit over that section. And that's something we also want to ask Terry about. Just wonder whether we are going to see Terry here. I don't quite see her at the moment. Anyway, let's see if I can bring this up. So can you see how long this road is on normal sort of territory, and then it starts going down, and then there it would have gone quite steeply down, that last section there. And I would imagine this part here, she would not have seen anything because the lights would have gone above the water, and then it would have been too late. And when she did try to brake, was it on mud? Did the car sort of skid into the water? Did it turn to the side and sort of turn over? Those are some of the questions we want to ask. The other thing that I kind of want to deal with Terry is what was the right way out, and how in her mind did this sort of wrong turn take place. Okay, let's just bring up another image. That's just kind of zoomed in a little bit. and you can see the road going through there, and then it opens up to this wide area, which is fairly flat. And then right at the end, it slopes down. Right at the very end of it, the road slopes down. I mean, steeply. I mean, that last section there, it's sloping down very steeply. That part is fairly flat. That part is fairly flat. So I've got to tell you, and I do want to do a bit of self-disclosure. Driving, whatever you experience while driving, I want to encourage you guys to think about it as well. I went on holiday in April, but with just me and my dog, and I arrived at my destination, well, halfway to my destination, really late at night, and my halfway point to where I was going was next to the Orange River, and the Orange River was in spate. It was flooding, and I didn't know the area at all. It was pitch dark, and so it was exactly the same kind of situation. I was driving on my own late. I was tired. It was dark. I knew there was a lot of water around me. I had no idea where it was. I had to drive on dirt roads. I was driving on someone's farm. That is where I was staying. And there was actually a section where I actually had to dip down and drive through water. And I mean, I knew the river was flooding. And so what do you do? And so I kind of assumed that the water that I saw, it was just black, but I assumed that it was not very deep. It didn't appear very deep. But when I do sort of look at the, what's the word, the texture of the water, and roll your window down and listen as well. Of course, I was aware. I dropped down and I could see the water, and I paused, and then I went through it, and then I came out safely the other side. There was a car that arrived the night before. I was told that they were simply too afraid to go any further, and the people from the farmhouse had to come through. But it was quite a weird situation where, in order to get to the reception of this place, you literally had to do a water crossing, right? And I just remember thinking it was really dangerous. And even the next morning when the sun was up, there was this real peril of my dog falling into the water and being just swept away because it was rushing so much. So this idea that, driving at night, it has to be foul play. Well, it can very much just be human error, human perception error. Anika says, does GPS even work out in the campground? It's a good question. But I think what we do know is that it does have, cell phone reception. Not absolutely top notch. Terry did tell us that. Oh, I see Terry is there. Terry, I see you. Okay. I think let's bring Terry on quickly, or maybe even for a while. I don't know if she's ready. Terry, are you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Good to see you, Terry. This is Terry Dean. Terry was at the Prosser Campground. Can you answer the question about could you get GPS reception and all that kind of thing when you were there?
I'm just getting double audio, like I can hear it on StreamYard, and so I just turn off the YouTube then?
Yeah, turn off the YouTube volume. Yeah.
Okay. So now I won't be able to see chat, I don't think now, but it sounds a lot better. Hi.
Hi, good to see you, Terry.
Thanks. Good to be here. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I wish it was under a lot different circumstances. It's just feeling really, really blue. Just came as a shock and not a shock, but just a real adjustment for sure. So I'm glad to be here in this safe community to talk about it.
So Terry, when you were at Prosser, I remember you saying to me that you couldn't send pictures or video because the internet was somewhat slower. But could you access GPS and all of that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I was using the CalTopo app that they set me up with, and They said sometimes it'll go offline, but just keep tracking and it'll keep track of it and load it up when it can. But it looked like it was tracking me the whole time. And I could send just written text, not anything with images. So it was definitely a slower connection, not really good bars, but it was working. It never just shut out on me and I couldn't do anything.
Okay, I'm trying to find that map. I didn't really expect to have you on this soon, but I'm trying to find that CalTopo map. Not quite sure where I have it here. But what I found
the first image that you showed helps too. The very first one when you first came on.
Yeah, I know I've got it here. I just want to get to it. There, I think is it that one? Is that it? Or is it? There it is. There it is.
Yeah, that one.
So this is the map of the actual search, and is that where they actually found the vehicle over there?
Yes.
So
that's what I was pointing out to you. That orange line, that's a track that just a volunteer did. All of those lines are where volunteers went.
So basically, 3 volunteers got quite close. The one in the red, the one in the orange, and the one in the purple. Is that right?
Exactly. And the purple and orange were both on water. So people took their individual kayaks out there. I'm assuming that's what that was.
Yeah, because it looks like the one on red went right over the area. This one here, right?
Absolutely.
But I must say, in a way, it's quite almost counterintuitive. You say, don't look over there because somebody else has looked over there. And then you don't, because I mean, you were there. So you're like, I'm not going to go and look over there because someone else has, but you don't know who the someone else was. It wasn't necessarily like, it could have just been an amateur person going there and for 5 seconds kind of thing. So I think that is one of the answers to how did they not find it? Well, someone went there and they just sort of passed by and then, oh, well, I have searched it. Well, not really kind of thing. So
yeah, well, different times of day, the lighting is different too.
Yeah. So that's you over there, Terry Dean. Is it the green?
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember what color I put in that day. No, mine is like that orange color because I kept going down to the water from there.
Okay.
So that was just me going around the campground. Yeah, and I did that orange line. That's where I took the pictures of the really steep bank.
So I must say it's really good to see your name here, as part of the sort of search effort. But it does make one wonder, if you had gone here, would you have seen anything? And I think the answer is probably not, because, a lot of people think that when you see this image, when you see that image, these are pictures that Terry took, by the way. When you see the image of the vehicle and it looks like it's sort of silvery, that's after it was turned over. It was actually the chassis that was showing, and so it wouldn't be that easy to see anything.
Well, I did actually go on the other side too. I think I would have had to zoom in to that map. There's so many searchers' names on there. When you're zoomed out, it's literally just a map of names. I mean, there's been so many volunteers out there. But I was at the actual party area, and I'm just, of all my regrets, and Nick, you told me this, both times I went there, you said, go from the party area and walk down to the water, take a video, how far is it? And when I did finally find the party area, because the sanctuary it's hidden, it's not in the designated campground, it's off in the woods. You don't register to camp there. It's secret, like it's supposed to be. And when I finally found it, the nearest water was just a little trickle. It was just an inlet, and with the water being so low, I didn't walk down there because I just thought, a car could go down there, but it's not going to submerge. I mean, it looked to me like the water was maybe 2 or 3 feet deep. So I didn't walk down there, but what I needed to think was one step further and go, where is the closest deeper water from this spot? And that's exactly where she was. So when I came out of that sanctuary, and there's a Y, you can either go to the water or go back up to the road. And I just thought, I had already talked to the search and rescue fire department people there, and they said they've searched every inch of that to 60 feet out. There's nothing but dirt and gravel in there. It's not there. So I was trying to figure out the best use of my time. And I'll tell you, if I had just gone right there, I'd have much more information for you as far as tire tracks and how many, if cars were parked down there, or just, it was just frustrating to me that I was right there and I just didn't go down to the water from there. And that's exactly where she was.
So this image that's on alongside us right now, that is not how it appeared. That is after the dive team had kind of flipped the car over. So it's not like, oh, it was so easy to see. But I do think that is how a lot of us imagined it would be. It would be like, oh, there's a silver shape, there's a silver fragment in this water, and you're going to see it, kind of thing. Also, it's going to be right next to the river. It's not going to be far in. And obviously, we didn't assume that the vehicle went straight into the dam and at quite some speed. But so the issue is, first of all, what you're seeing in this image isn't really accurate in terms of how it was originally. It would have been flipped over. And obviously, under 14 feet of water, that is like 2 people standing on top of each other, plus about at least 2 or 3 or 4 feet. So it's fairly deep. And because it gets murky very quickly after, say, 3-4 feet, well, then your visibility is very, very low. Again, I actually assume that if the car is in the water, it can't be more than like 5 or 6 feet from the edge, kind of thing, because you just wouldn't have expected it to go that speed in. But that's the problem, is you are searching for what you are thinking about. You're not just searching, you're not being curious. And that's kind of why you've got to have this scout mindset. You've got to say, what don't I know? Not what do I know, and impose it onto the situation. What don't I know, right? But another big thing is, even if you didn't know the vehicle was there, surely it did leave tracks right at the edge. And I must say, in this particular image, you don't see any tracks. You see the tracks once the vehicle's been pulled up. You see very clearly the sort of mud tracks. But in this particular image, you don't really see anything. Something else that was quite interesting was that they said that the dam level actually dropped 3.5 to 4 feet between the time that Kylie drove into the dam and now. That is quite a significant amount as well. And I don't know whether that, if you look at the strip over here, I don't know whether that strip is where the water level has actually dropped a little bit. I don't know if that is what is showing there. Sometimes water kind of what's the word? It wettens soil, even though hasn't been there before, almost like the beach. You know what I mean? The water gets absorbed into the soil from the side. It's not as though the water was at that level, but this could be a situation where the water was at that level and has dropped down. I must say, a lot of what we dealt with in this case, especially in hindsight, feels quite a lot like the Scott Peterson case, because there you also had a lot of searchers who did go over San Francisco Bay over months. I mean, they searched for Lacey Peterson for months and basically gave up. And eventually the weather, nature gave them back to us. You know what I mean? It was actually a storm that kind of dislodged their remains, and they were sort of washed onto San Francisco Bay. So that was a defeated search. This at least wasn't that. But it is interesting, the intertextuality with the first search. This was literally 4 or 5 days after that first search. that this one was found, and it was definitely more difficult to find.
Hey,
So,
Nick,
yeah.
I'd be curious to know too how low that reservoir gets or has gotten in the past. We've been in a long drought here, but we're learning from Lake Mead that they're finding people in there from decades old cases. So I thought about that too.
I think I read
it gets
somewhere
that low.
that it's at its deepest, it's 67 feet or something like that, which is not terribly deep. I heard something ridiculous where someone thought it was 7,500 feet deep. It was like, yeah. And so the car's in the deepest spot. Yeah, okay. So, I've got my notebook. I don't know if you've got yours, but I want to now kind of go. Oh, there we go. I want to go into a different vein a little bit and just talk about who is responsible. So I'm going to, how are we going to do this? Shall we do it like that? Okay. So I want to kind of go through a couple of these names, and what I want to do is kind of have a conversation with chat as well. So who do we say is responsible for what happened here? Is it Kylie? Is it Sammy? Is it Mags? Is it Jagger? Is it her mother? Is it whoever sold alcohol to everybody? Is it whoever provided all these other substances? Is it the substances that's at fault? Is it the campground? Should the campground have proper signage or, something like that? Is it the 300? Is it collectively their fault that this happened? What do you guys think? What do you guys think is the answer to that? Whose fault is this? Who's responsible? So I see right now, 54% went 55 back to 54 back to 55. 55% say someone else is still responsible, right? So who is that someone else? Who is the someone else that's responsible? So if it's not Kylie, who is responsible? So let's see what you guys say. Is it Sammy? So Asa Jensen says, I think it's a collective failure. Moni Osborne says, is it law enforcement? Is it her best friend, Mags? Is it her mother? What's your opinion, Terry?
I was looking at that poll. I actually, you had it up last night, and I couldn't answer it then, and I still had a hard time answering that today. I think it's just because she's so young. You just tend to want to think that safeguards should have been put in place for her that she didn't have any say in. You just want someone to have authority over her in that way. But I think ultimately just knowing the vibe of that town and the lifestyle of that area, and I believe that her mom would want to be extending some freedoms to her, just living a more nonconformist type of lifestyle, wanting her daughter to be independent. And I think it lies solely on Kylie, to be honest with you. She had a good head on her shoulders, and it's just you shouldn't have to pay that price for a mistake.
So I saw a really great comment. I think I saw it on Patreon where somebody said, what does the law say about responsibility? So in other words, at what age does the law give you certain responsibilities? And I think that's a great point. But I think a real question here is, well, she's 16 years old. If she's not responsible for herself, who is? And I think then the question becomes kind of simpler. Like if you're a lot younger, can you then say, well, that an older friend is responsible? And I think you can kind of make that argument, but who is really responsible for a younger person at the end of the day, right? So SMK Valinsky says it's not legal responsibility, but perhaps moral. Giant Mad Bum says drinking and driving equals no good. And I do want to talk a little bit about the terrifying things I got up to when I was 17 years old, and some things I'm not even going to mention because it's quite horrible it's like I shouldn't really be here, and someone should punch me, and I should even punch myself for doing that, and that's when I was even older, right? I think we must do also some self-acknowledgement, and hopefully Terry will as well, but we also want to turn the conversation a little bit in that way. Carolina says, who's to blame? We are all ultimately responsible for ourselves. But at 16, her parents too, also the sale of alcohol and drugs. That's quite a good answer. I think one's got to bear in mind that she didn't have parents. She wasn't I think her parents had split up, and so I think she was living with her mother and stepfather. So even there, you have the parental role to some extent fragmented, right? You didn't really hear much from Kylie's stepfather. I'm not sure if you did, and I didn't see him, but you didn't really hear much from him. But if you compare to Gabby Petito, Gabby was 22, and there was a big story about, someone should have protected her. And I think even her mother today feels a little bit guilty that she couldn't have done something. And I think if you feel guilt, it doesn't mean you are guilty, but it's certainly a sign that you care. If you don't feel any guilt, that's maybe a problem. And I think that is what Sammy felt. I think Sammy felt bad, to her credit, and Sammy did quite a lot. And I think that raises a really interesting question, which is, I brought up something about, was Kylie an isolated girl? Was that a factor in all of this? And a lot of people didn't like that. I heard a lot of people who homeschool saying homeschooling is absolutely irrelevant, etc., etc. But there's another way of thinking about the isolation aspect, which is not looking at Kylie, but looking at Sammy, who comes into the situation. So if you say, I think Kylie was really isolated, there was no one around her. Well, there was this massive search. So when Kylie went missing, the community responded. I would be flattered if I disappeared and a neighborhood turned itself upside down looking for me. I'm pretty sure if I disappeared, I don't know how long people would take to miss me, kind of thing. And in this particular case, you had the whole neighborhood. But is that because of Kylie, or is that because of Sammy? And I would argue that I think Sammy's status at school, Sammy's cred in a way, Sammy's friends, in her class. When you see Sammy coming forward during the graduation ceremony, you hear quite a lot of applause. It seems to be above average. You get the idea that she's well liked, she's kind of a leader. So I think that is to do with Sammy's socialization, not Kylie's, right? But the flip side of it, so if you say isolation's got nothing to do with this, Kylie wasn't isolated. Well, the flip side of this is you say, there were so many people, there was such a big search. The flip side is, if you say, well, the whole community responded, yeah, but not the 300. The 300 didn't fall over themselves to bring information forward. So if Sammy did, great, but the 300 didn't. And you kind of got this idea that the police spoke to them, but they didn't come to the police, because it was like, I don't really know this girl. She wasn't at my school. Somebody else's problem. But I can tell you now, if Sammy had gone missing, I think the 300 would have responded in a different way. There again, you talk about responsibility, right? What do you think about that, Terry?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't think they saw anything. I've got a little bit of a disconnect with it, exactly how her final moments went. I don't think responsibility falls on any other attendees there. It's hard to put all that into words, but I think you're right on there.
So
You're right.
Leslie says, who is saying it's mom's fault? How cruel. We're not saying it's anybody's fault. We're saying, is anyone responsible? If so, who is more responsible and who isn't? And I would submit, and by the way, I'm not a parent, so if there's anyone who's the least qualified to answer the question, it's probably me. I don't have children. I do have a dog, right? And maybe I'm overly responsible for my dog. But the thing is, when someone is younger, then I think the responsibility changes. So if you could say, what if Kylie was 10 years old? What would the responsibility be then? And it's not such a simple question as you may think that, oh, so her mother's responsible. The question is, what do you say is when someone is responsible for themselves? When, in other words, when were you responsible for yourself? And the other side of it is, if you are, say, a mother, at what point do you impose your control over your child in a very regimented way and then maybe an oppressive way? What is healthy? What is normal in our society? What is normal in one country and in another country, one state, another state? The flip side to all of that is, you may say, her mother should have done everything until Kylie was 18 years old. Well, what about when you were 18? Did you listen to your mother? What is normal in the situation? Bear in mind, we live in a society that is very free, and we like to enjoy our freedom. And look at the context of this case. This case took place in the middle of the American summer, when you want to enjoy your freedom, you want to enjoy life. And in the midst of that, you have this tragedy. If you think about it, we're 5 days away from the anniversary of Gabby Petito. So you had the same thing. You had these young people going out into nature, wanting to be alive, wanting to be free. And in this pursuit of life, there's death, right? Whose fault is that? Should you stay at home? Should you try and just be safe? It's kind of, sorry, Terry, you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I just before you moved on, I just had a thought on that. This party was out in the woods. If this had been at someone's home, the owners of that home could be liable for what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
If that was done on their property. So it's kind of an interesting perspective as we're talking about responsibility. If it was on private property, someone could be facing some pretty major charges right now.
So Cassie says, I think Sammy is responsible, maybe not legally, but at least morally. I'm sure that that Sammy does feel some moral responsibility, and that's why she did what she did. She came forward. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. Such a big comment, I can't see myself. Anyway, so what I've tried to do now is I've taken it the route where you say, let's investigate this from whose fault is it, who's to blame. So you say, is it Kylie? Is it Sammy? Is it Mags? Is it Jagger? Is it her mother? Is it the person selling alcohol? And Terry actually went to some of the liquor stores in Truckee, and I think you said they close at 2 a.m., right?
They do. Actually, the two liquor stores that are in town close at midnight. But all the convenience stores, gas stations and such sell beer there. Beer and wine, not liquor, and they have sales till 2:00.
So can I ask you a silly question? First of all, what's the legal drinking age in, I guess, California, right? So is it universal across America, or is it different state by state?
It's 21 in the whole country.
Wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I know when I covered Amanda Knox, one of the things I think she mentioned was that when she left America and she went to Italy, I think she was 20 years old. And she was, I guess, someone who didn't really consume alcohol because of the drinking thing. And once she went to Italy, well, I don't know what the drinking age in Italy is, but it's not 21. And so you can have quite a nice party there because it's a different legal system. But I found that quite interesting. Of course, the fact that it's 21 and whether it's enforced at 21 are two different things, right? But I must say, even as a South African, 21 is like 3 years beyond, I think, the legal drinking age. Yeah, it's like, wow, you've got to wait 3 years to have your first beer. And funny enough, when I did the previous live, I actually drank a beer that I last drank. It was the first beer I ever drank. It's called Lion Lager. It was like, wow, the first beer I ever had was this particular beer, and it tasted terrible. But I mean, I think I was also below drinking age, but not far from it. Whereas 16 is 5 years from from that. So I think one thing that could come from this, I don't know whether I'm shouting against the wind or whatever, but maybe other youngsters watching this, or not this show, but aware of the circumstances here, if they see someone who's underage and they know that someone's underage, they may be like, this could happen to you. I don't want that to happen to you. Hopefully, maybe it's just like, well, that was her bad luck. But you would imagine that this will have affected the youth in a way. Certainly the local youth. You would imagine that the class of 2022 from Truckee will remember this for the rest of their lives. And I can tell you, when I went on my, let's just bring this up a little bit. I can tell you, when I went on my, it wasn't a graduation party, it was sort of a graduation trip, I guess, where a group of us went somewhere and we sort of had a kind of a holiday. So I went on a trip, and one of my best friends went on another trip. And then while this happened, there was a serious collision. They were actually on a pickup truck. And so there were maybe 5 or 6 guys on a pickup truck, and the pickup truck crashed. And it was quite strange because there weren't really very many severe injuries, but one of the people did die. So you had this crash and one fatality, and for some reason the other guys didn't really get badly injured. But what had happened was the impact was such that this classmate of mine, his name was Julian, he'd cut off a finger before he'd even started school. He'd cut off a finger cutting bread, and I kind of went to kindergarten with him. I'd known him my whole life, and he died during the same sort of situation. The pickup truck hit something, and apparently his heart broke loose of his. It was such a shock to his heart that his heart apparently, to some extent, disconnected from the tissues inside of his chest. That's why I'd say it's quite strange. He had this terrible result, and the other guys seemed to be okay. But anyway, that was something that was a shadow over our whole thing. And if you were partying and having fun, that was as if to say, be careful, slow it down, be less excessive, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. We had a lot of parties like that, like the party Kylie went to. Not as big. I grew up in a small town in Michigan, but we knew we couldn't party at anybody's house, so we went off in the woods. So we'd follow the power lines, so we'd have power line parties. The Curves was one place you could just pull off and go and party in the woods. And man, we were mainly just drinking. I mean, this was 30 years ago now, but we were driving when we shouldn't have been driving. Absolutely. I mean, we had a name for it. You're driving one-eyed, because if you close one eye, everything it's not as blurry. We'd call it driving by braille, meaning we've got the little speed rumples on the side. So if you hit those, it means you need to go pull back over. I mean, we had names for it even. And it's pretty amazing to think that, we didn't have any tragedies like that. just looking back, there was definitely some poor decision making. And, you know, with the drinking age being 21, by the time we were 18, we were so close to Canada, we would just go into Detroit, you go take the tunnel down and go over to Ontario, and the drinking age is 18 there. So well, all of a sudden we were instantly adults, and we could go over and drink and party in Canada, and then come back over. Just nobody should have to pay, you know, with their life for making a decision like that. I just feel badly for her, but it's definitely an eye opener, and you know that will be her legacy. Then is hopefully save that from happening to someone else.
Yeah, well, I'm going to share 3 horror stories from my life. And the idea is not to be self-indulgent. It's not to make it all about me. The idea is actually that it starts to turn things a little bit around, but where you think about not Kylie should have been responsible or Sammy should have been responsible or mother, we think about how responsible were you, and also how responsible are you, and also how responsible are we collectively, right? So I'm going to go first. As I said, the idea is not to be self-indulgent, it's to turn this conversation around. And I'm not proud of any of this. I'm not saying it with glee or with anything like that. It's pretty terrible memories in a way, in hindsight. So the first one I've sort of told you about, Julian, this friend of mine who died during our sort of senior graduation thing. The second one followed quite closely on that. I went to school early. I was also at school a year early. I didn't graduate as early as Kylie did. I was 17. I turned 17 in my final year, but I was quite young. And so when I went into the Air Force, in that time it was compulsory, it was mandatory. And then 2 or 3 years later, they sort of did away with it completely. So I ended up doing my service in a way for nothing. And so I also suffered this injury in a way for nothing, because if I hadn't done my service, who knows? Who knows? It may have been even worse if I'd been a university student. Who knows? But anyway, what happened was, and I'm not here to say any of this is very smart. I'm here to say the opposite. So I actually didn't have a license, right? I didn't actually have a license. I was 17 years old, going on 18, and my mother had actually died a few months earlier, and I guess I'd inherited her car, and but I actually didn't even have a license. And so what had happened was I actually, Terry, don't go away. I'll bring you back a little bit later. Okay. So
I'm not going away. I'm listening to every word you're saying.
Okay. So what happened was I was in the Air Force, and I kind of wanted to come home during weekends and so on. And so it was quite difficult doing that without a vehicle. Of course, I didn't have a license, but the sort of what was the word? The fine print between it all was I had a friend who did have a license. So it was a very weird situation where I had a car, I didn't have a license, and then I had a friend of mine drive the car, and I was kind of the passenger. And so I was being chauffeured. Very spoiled, very bad situation. And so one particular night, we were supposed to go back to base at about, I think we were going to leave at 3 o'clock in the morning. And this friend of mine didn't have excellent eyesight. I think he did need glasses, but also he wasn't familiar with my hometown. And we refueled, and he got in the car and he drove through a parking lot. And he didn't know that there were little traffic islands in this parking lot that were sort of gray. He couldn't see them. A little bit like driving into a dam and not knowing it's there. And anyway, he hit one of these traffic islands, just a kind of a strip of pavement. And the car basically turned almost on its side, but you just saw a shower of sparks. It destroyed the gearbox, and the car kind of went on its side and then came back down. Anyway, we drove back home. The only gear that worked was first gear. And my father then gave us another vehicle, kind of a construction vehicle. And we then went back to my base in that vehicle. So we just actually crashed a car, or he had. He had a license, but he was also very young, 18 years old. And we just crashed a vehicle, gave us another vehicle. And you can say, well, you shouldn't have given the vehicle. Well, then how would you have gotten to base? But still, you shouldn't have gotten the vehicle. Yes, that's right. Anyway, we went back to the base, and I don't know if it was the next weekend or 2 weekends from there, I was in a terrible accident. It's the worst accident I've ever been in. I've never crashed my own vehicle. I've never damaged my own vehicle. He was driving, and I think it was over the Easter period, and we were leaving Pretoria. And as we were crossing through this intersection, there was a car that was waiting to turn. And I think the car thought, okay, he's going to stop when the light goes amber. And of course, he didn't stop. And so it was a head-on collision, and I was the only serious injury. And that injury has kind of been a curse my whole life. I had a slice through the knee, right? But all of that was based on really bad decision making. Why do you have a vehicle without a license? Why is this whole situation happening? And obviously I did get my license soon after that, but there were some even more horrible things that happened subsequent to that. And that brings us to the next scenario, which happened maybe 3 or 4 months later. So at this point I was licensed because I certainly didn't want to be driven around by this guy who'd had 2 accidents back to back. I mean, he'd basically written off the one vehicle and badly damaged my vehicle, basically. So anyway, I got my license. And so one day, I'll never forget this. One day I was driving on the highways between Johannesburg and Pretoria. I think I was heading home, and the car just stopped operating, right? The car, in other words, the electricity just went off in the car. Nothing worked. I was in the middle of a 3 or 4 lane highway, and the car just stopped operating. And so I was trying to get to the left-hand side. Of course, I couldn't use my indicator because there was no electricity. And what ended up happening was I ended up stopping in the middle lane, certainly not the left-hand lane, sort of the middle lane of this multi-lane highway, because I couldn't, because I lost power, I couldn't get fast enough to the left-hand side. The car eventually came to a complete standstill. And then I got out the car. This is with cars flying by me on both sides. This is on a 3 or 4 lane highway. And got out the car, ran to the side of the road. And now it's like a situation of if you just leave that situation like that, somebody else could get killed. There's a car standing completely still in the middle of the highway. So do you just leave the car there? The other side was, well, how on earth do you get the car out of that situation? And so this is the part that's really crazy and why I shouldn't be here today. So what I then did was I ran from the side of the road where I was safe, because I just felt I can't leave this car here, but also, like, how on earth do you get the car going? And then I got into the car, turned the ignition, and the car, by some miracle, just started. And literally what was wrong was the battery wasn't connecting properly. Some of the battery wires were just loose. And so for some other reason, after the car became stationary and I tried to start it again, I did start, and I was able to drive out. That was a situation that there should have been a tragedy around there. And I'm not even giving you the worst thing that I went through, right? What do you think of that, Terry?
That sounds terrifying. I mean, I felt like I was right there with you when you were describing that. I mean, terrifying. If you were a cat, you would have lost a couple of your 9 lives right then.
Yeah, I think I lost 2 or 3 then. I think definitely. So I wasn't drunk when that happened. That was completely, you could say it's bad luck, but you could also say it's bad mechanics. You shouldn't allow your car to be in that situation. But there's a good example of something that a young person does that actually gets the public, that endangers the public. And I'm just grateful that the stars aligned and somehow the car started when I got back into it. But it could easily not have started. I could have been hit from the back by a truck. You could have had a massive car pileup. You could have had an absolute disaster following just a few short months from a previous accident that I'd been in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to do by telling you this is that a lot of us who are here, who are saying it's Kylie's fault, it is her mother's fault, all of us came through close scrapes, I think. That we were lucky, I think. Lucky not once or twice, but many times. And so when you're talking about responsibility, what about your responsibility? What about my responsibility? What about our responsibility? And that's,
well, another perspective is, I talked to the campground host there who had been about 4 months at the campground, and he had some pretty strong opinions. I mean, I thought the party was at the campground, so he was the one that told me. I just saw someone wrote 2 tracks. Nobody else calls those 2 tracks, just only people in Michigan, the little dirt roads. But yeah, he was the one who pointed me in the direction of, that's how I actually found where the camp spot was, where the party spot was. But he said in 4 months, it's every Friday and Saturday night are parties out there. Every single Friday and Saturday. And some had been so big that there were DJs out there. It was really loud. And he said he had tried to call law enforcement a couple times for just things that were happening in his campground that he was trying to keep safe. Not teens, just out of towners and things going on. But he said this never had to happen. All they have to do is patrol there. If they would just come through with their cars every once in a while, flash their lights, let them know that they're around out there, that they know that they're out there. He just felt it was, he put responsibility on law enforcement. So that's a different aspect, not just thinking about her mom or her friends or what they could have done to avoid this. But I mean, it's law enforcement that's there to protect and serve. Apparently it's not a secret that these parties are happening out there every weekend. Did I lose Nick? It's just me now. Just me.
But apparently Verna Coy is from the area. I'd like to bring her in. I just don't quite know how to. Let me try and email the link to Stephanie. That might work. And Stephanie can maybe pass it on. So let's try that. I don't think it's going to work. But yeah, I mean, you've got to bear in mind, you've got to wear earbuds, otherwise it's going to be a disaster. But let's try, see if it works. While we're waiting for Verna to possibly join us, someone came up with this question: why didn't Kylie call her mother? And I find that quite a interesting question with regard to this whole thing of responsibility, because you don't want to call your mommy in the middle of a freedom celebration. You don't want to be that person who needs mommy. The whole point of this thing is to be free and to be independent and to have fun. And the most unfun thing about a party like that is going back home or mommy telling you what to do. The whole thing is that you are becoming an adult, right? That is the whole thing. And so why didn't Kylie call her mother? Well, I think part of it is if she did call her mother would have had to drive the route that you drove in the day at night. And tell us a little bit about the drive to Lost Trail Lodge. I mean, you did that drive.
Yeah, I did that. I knew it was going to be pretty rough. I've been over in that area before, doing some hiking a little bit lower down. I'd never gone that far up. I didn't want to go all the way up to the lodge, just out of respect for the family. But It's pretty rough. I mean, I've lived in the mountains for a lot of my adult life, and I'm used to driving in those conditions, but it's a lifestyle where you would want to be prepared. You don't want to have to run into town for every little thing. It's rough on vehicles, and just 4 or 5 miles can take you 15 minutes. It's rough going. And then you have to think about, winter. I was there obviously during the summer. Truckee gets over 200 inches of snow every year. That's I'll convert it for people. What is a little over 5 meters, 17 feet. That's a lot of snow. That's a good chunk of the year. I definitely wouldn't want to be going in and out of there when there's a lot of snow on the ground. So that's something to think about as well. Inconvenient to say the least. But once you get out there, you would just feel, I don't even want to go into town. I don't need to go into town for anything. Like it's a haven out there. It's beautiful. But not a drive that if you need milk, you don't want to do that drive just for one thing. It takes planning to live that far out, and crazy roads to learn how to drive on for sure. I can imagine that she didn't call her mom, partially for pride, but I think she probably thought she could drive. I mean, you don't know until you're actually behind the wheel and going, gosh, I'm not as good as I thought I was. Yeah. And I just don't think there was time. By the time she would have maybe realized that she'd made a mistake and wasn't doing that well, it was too late. I just don't think there was time for her to make that decision.
I had a lucky escape once. I've said now that I've never crashed a car or damaged a car, but I think the closest I ever came was, I think I was in my mid-30s and I was driving, this was for photojournalism, I was driving a vehicle that had been given to me for the purpose of writing the story. But there'd been a heck of a lot of rain, and I was driving on muddy roads, like dirt roads, but that had turned into mud. And I wasn't reckless. I was, in fact, very, very careful. And I kind of came over the top of this road that was quite steep. It was almost like an eggshell, a rounded eggshell. And even though I was going really slowly, I was going, 15, 20 kilometers an hour. I was really going slowly. As soon as I got onto the other side, the car just started skiing down the mud. It was just like, and there was nothing I could do. I had no traction. This is one of those things where there's absolutely no way of avoiding this. But fortunately, I was going slowly, and the car just sort of gently, slid down and then went kind of off the road. But there was a big muddy cushion on the side. The mud was really, really soft, almost like a marshmallow. And so the car sort of eventually, I think, came to like a slight, it wasn't a very, very hard stop, but somewhat of a hard stop. And I was surprised as anyone, like, wow, nothing's damaged. Like, this car was completely out of control, and it came to a stop by hitting a mud bank, and there's literally no damage whatsoever. But it just shows you again, even, that may be a surface that may have been, if you look at this particular image here, let's just bring it up. If you look at that mud that's there, could it be that Kylie at the last minute saw what was in front of her, tried to stop, and then she sort of skidded into the lake, right? Could that have happened? And we don't know, but I can tell you, you've got absolutely no purchase on a steep slope that's muddy. You just don't have can't do anything.
I would like to know where she parked, because I drove up to the actual sanctuary, and I don't know if you can show the map that's zoomed out a little bit. It kind of shows the road a little bit more, but when you turn up, I'll just kind of narrate. But when you turn down the main campground road, in between the two campgrounds, there's Lakeside Campground, and then there's the Prosser Family Campground. So in between the turnoffs for both of those, you take a turnoff to the right. There's no signs. It's just a 2-track dirt road. That's what goes to the party area. So you hang a right and go around a few bends, takes a minute or two, and then you have to take another right to go to the party area. So let me see, I'm trying to look on there. Yeah, you'd have to zoom out just a little bit, I think. Oh no, it's just not showing the actual road on there. Okay. Anyway, when I was driving up to the sanctuary, it's like a road for ATVs or dirt bikes. It said vehicles not recommended. So I put it in 4-wheel drive, but there were big ruts. Like my truck's going like almost like it wants to flip over. If you don't know how to drive very well on those, you really have to take it slow and look ahead and plan. I would imagine there would be a lot of people just in regular cars that would not want to drive actually up to the party area. That would mean that they would be parked down further. You don't really walk through the woods there. You would follow the trail, the road. So I'm just curious if, she had a CRV, that's an SUV. It definitely could make it up there. I just wonder if, I just like to know where she parked. Because when she came out of the party area, she would have needed to, if she was parked at the party area, she would have needed to take a left to get up to the main campground road. So that would just be one error turning right instead of left. And that would take her straight down to the water. If there's no other car lights to follow, there's no street lights out there at all. It's pure black. It would basically, at that juncture, that's the one right there. At that juncture, it would look the exact same going right or left. It's just a dirt path. You really can't get a ton of speed because it's just a pretty rough road. But yeah, that one that you're showing there, that was where that red arrow is. Yeah, that's.
Yeah. So if you look at this part over here, it's almost like it's symmetrical. It's like a U with a little tail on it. And you can imagine if you're not sure if you're on that side of the U or that side, that you don't know where you are. And you're trying to get to go that way. And because you don't have direction, you don't know whether, because the sun's not shining, you don't know whether you're going that way or that way. And there's also
I'll tell you that the X in the road there, right in the middle, the X.
There.
Yep. To the left, that takes you to the party. Okay. Where it has that little V in the road. Yep. The party's right about there.
Yeah.
So when she came out, if she was parked up there, she would have needed to go left and then take another left at the main campground road. Yep. Left and left would have taken her out. So
she made a mistake of going right over here.
Right. Yep.
And then left over here.
But kids may have been parked down at the water just because they didn't want to drive up on that rough road.
And that
Verna that's in chat would probably know that.
Yeah. By the way, Stephanie, thanks a lot for trying to sort of broker all of this. Thanks for the $10 as well. But yeah, it's just difficult to do this kind of on the fly. But one thing I wanted to say to you, Terry, is if you think like a teenager, you in this setting, I don't know what it was like for you when you were there, but what I would imagine is if I was there, if I was in this group, one of the first things I would want to do is walk to the water. I would want to be standing by the water with a drink in my hand. You know what I mean? And then there's also the possibility that you would swim in the water, that you would skinny dip, or you would do whatever. I don't know how cold the water is, but it's the middle of summer.
It's cold. I didn't get a temperature reading on it, but it does. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. It does get down to the upper 40s at night there. So
yeah.
I doubt swimming would have been at that time, to be honest with you. It's beautiful 80-degree during the day, but you need to wear a jacket at night. So I doubt whether they would want to go swimming at that point, but definitely standing by the water for sure.
So
but it's pitch black. It's pitch black.
So another question that I've seen, which I find a bit odd, but it's nevertheless out there, is how do we know Kylie was intoxicated? Well, I think the short answer is we will find out in terms of the toxicology. To me, it's kind of almost the opposite. How do you think this happened if she wasn't intoxicated? In other words, how did someone end up driving into the reservoir if they were completely sober? Why didn't any of the other 300 drive into the reservoir, right? That might be not a very scientific answer, but to me, the obvious answer is, what do you think happens at these senior parties? Like, what's the obvious thing that happens? So to me, it's like, how on earth is this a mystery? Oh, no, I don't think she was intoxicated. Not. So why would Sammy lie that there's alcohol in the car? Well, I think there definitely was alcohol. I mean, isn't that part of the reason why something's happened? I can see Werner. Werner, can you hear us? Have you got earbuds? You're going to hear an echo. So as soon as you've got your earbuds in, give us a thumbs up. Okay. Yeah, so how do we know Kylie was intoxicated? We don't know, but I also think it's kind of obvious. We don't know for a fact, but you've got to ask: is the whole thing that she wasn't intoxicated? So then it's somebody else's. It's foul play. Then what are we talking about then? Right? If you say she wasn't intoxicated, then you can't sort of bring that into it like she was. Her what do you call it? Her faculties were impinged. Well, then what did happen? So, what I think is the obvious explanation, if you take that away, then what is the more obvious explanation? I just don't see it.
I think it could have happened whether she was intoxicated or not, to be honest with you. It's being 16 and it's pitch black.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be curious to know if she had been out there before, if she'd been to parties out there before. I mean, maybe she'd already been there 20 times by then, or maybe that was her first time. I'd be interesting to know.
Okay, so let's bring on Werner. Hi, Werner.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Werner. Welcome.
Good to see you. So you are local?
Yes, I am.
Do you know the family at all?
I do not know, but I know the area very well. We camp out there all the time.
So do you think it's possible that campers were annoyed by the noise, or is the sanctuary far enough away that...
It's far away. Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere. They weren't really in the family campground. They were far enough away to where even if there were a few people in that campground, it wouldn't have bothered them.
So even if there are 300 people and it's kind of the middle of the night, because one thing I remember Terry saying was that it's absolutely silent. So
it is, but there's a bunch of trees. And if you look at that map, you could actually see how far away from that campground it is. It's literally in the middle of nowhere where the sanctuary is, where the party site was. It wasn't, it's clear across that inlet, kind of where you described it was. You had it right.
So what do you think, like there seems to be this sudden departure at 12:30, at about midnight. What is the consensus in Truckee? Why did everyone just suddenly decide to leave? Because it's fairly early to be leaving. Do you agree
that's what got me? Yeah, that's what got me. But there were other party sites out there too. So who knows? But did you go over the topography? How right where her car was found is actually a hill.
Over there?
Yeah, right underneath. So where her car was pulled out of the water, to the left of that, on the live video was some crime scene tape, like a little square of it. And directly above that is a hill, and it's about 15 feet. It's fairly steep. It's like shale-y rock. Our dirt is super hard, but there's also a lot of shale and stuff because the water's receded. And if she would have, there was a blank space right there that almost looked like a road. And if she would have started to turn and gone down that hill, the momentum would have took her right in the water. And right where that crime scene tape is probably where she bottomed out and left a little bit of evidence from her car.
Oh, so there was crime scene tape there?
Yeah, there was a square crime scene tape right to the left of when they pulled her car out.
That's really interesting. So,
and it's right at the bottom of the hill.
Yeah. I must say that's quite frustrating, although that does add some context to the idea that Adventures with Purpose found her quite quickly, basically in a day and a half. So, you kind of get the sense that the authorities gave them what they knew, and then they took it from there,
It's small. That's not in the main part of the lake. It's actually on a creek called Alder Creek. It's an offshoot of the lake.
Yeah.
And I know they were looking at the boat ramp, which was further away, just because of the phone ping, I believe. And everybody would have assumed she would have went down the boat ramp. But you can go in the water anywhere there. The road is super hard. We've had 2 huge rainstorms that have washed everything out here since she went missing. So there's no way there was going to be tracks.
But, it's easy to say in hindsight, but if you look at this map, there are so few points where the roads go straight out to the dam. There's one over there, there's one over there, there's one over there. And you kind of sort of wonder if you're thinking that she could have, the car's in the water. Isn't the obvious thing to say, where are the main exit points or entry points for the road and the dam? So just start there, and then once you've excluded that, exclude that. I mean,
well, it's
again,
directly
easy to
up
say,
from the party site. It's a straight line from the party site to where they found her car.
So can I ask you, have you driven there at night?
Oh yeah, when we went camping, we saw no rangers for over a week because I was getting stressed out about not paying, but we won't tell about that. And so there's nobody out there. It's very rarely used in the campground itself, but also it's so easy to get turned around. And all she literally did was take a right instead of a left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to not see those hills. You can't see anything. It's pitch black. As for someone not seeing her lights, there's trees in between the road she would have taken a right on and where the party was.
So, I mean, exactly on that point where you say she took a right instead of a left, it's like my thing where my car was stuck on the highway. The car could just as easily not have started, and it all ends unhappily ever after. And everyone says, what an idiot and whatever. She could just as easily have gone left, and we would have all been none the wiser. It's one of those things where somebody said earlier, it's your destiny. I don't like thinking of it quite like that, but there is that aspect where sometimes you're just unlucky in a way. I also don't think it's just bad luck, because some of it you like to say, let's try and be a bit smarter with what you do in these situations. But you do tend to think, what if she just turned the other way? What would have happened? And I do wonder, and that's kind of one of the things I sort of said to Terry was, I said, okay, so if she's not in the reservoir, if the car's not in the lake and it's not in the campground, then maybe it still didn't get, she was on her way home, but she didn't get home. And so that's why I wanted her to explore the last miles, of towards the Lost Trail Lodge. Have you stayed there?
No, never. No, never over there.
Have you ever driven over there?
I've been to Truckee many times, but not to the lodge. No, it's more off road. Yeah,
because it's totally like as Terry experienced, within a few miles, civilization's gone, and in a way, it's almost like the campground. What you said earlier. I think at night, forest and water, the one is vertical darkness, the other one is horizontal darkness, but there's just nothing there. So you don't have anything, you don't have street lighting to orientate yourself. It's just dark.
No. And the water receding, there's places to go in the water where you wouldn't have been able to before. You know, the roads are becoming, you know, it's many feet of water that is receded that you can just go right in the water. And it's steep. It's on an angle. I think that's hard to kind of describe. But if she started going off that hill, there's no way to stop a car. It's too slippery. And it's fairly steep. I mean, it's hard to, it looks like it's flat desert, but it's not. There's a steep little hill where that scrub brush ends and the actual beaches and the actual water is.
Can I ask you a dumb question? I honestly don't know the answer to this. What is the legal driving age in America?
16. So she could have got her permit at 15 and a half. So she couldn't have been driving more than a year.
Yeah.
But there's also
for us in other countries, for us, that's like, on the one hand, we think, okay, your drinking thing is way too strict, but your driving thing is way too lax. Is the driving thing to allow kids to drive themselves to school? What's the reasoning behind it?
I mean, I think 16 is a normal age, but like with me, I got 7 kids and I'm terrified to let them go any further than school. You know, it's just, everybody seems to get in an accident as a teenager. And the younger you are and the more inexperienced you are, you're going to get in an accident. Yeah. You know, you don't know. And, you know, out there, it's so easy to get turned around. GPS is spotty if she even tried to use it. You know, she probably figured she was going the right way and literally hit that hill and went down in the water. No chance.
Terry, do you think the driving age should be made later? What do you think?
Oh man, I'll tell you, 2 days after I got my license, I took all my friends out to lunch from school, took off, went to McDonald's, got in a car wreck right away. Mm-hmm. 2 days after having my license, I had 3 of my friends in the car. One of my friends was a track star. Her ankle got hurt. She was out for the season. My car was totaled. I mean, I have to say, yes, it's pretty young. Just knowing damage that can be done. I mean, vehicles are weapons. It's just. Yeah.
I mean, if I take I've gone through most of my life, touch wood, with virtually zero car accidents or anything. I've never crashed my own car. I'm talking about into another car or getting serious damage or whatever. But if I think about it, the worst accident I was in was within a month or 2 of when I was supposed to get my license, very, very close to that time. And I was 18 years old. And so you say, well, going back 2 years, you know. So I don't know. I think maybe you could look at statistics and just visit that question, just to say, who's responsible here? Well, maybe the law needs to be aware of it to some extent. I don't know whether what happened to Kylie means you've got to change the law in America, just that, I don't know what the answer is, but maybe one's got to think about it. If you're talking about responsibility, you know.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think it needs to be older.
I have a question for Verna. Just staying out there, because I stayed out at the campground too. Obviously, that's just one night that I've been there. It sounds like you've been there a lot more. But what's your experience with law enforcement out there? I mean, do you ever see? Is it patrolled or not at all?
No, not at all. Even
and they know the parties are. They know the parties are going on, right?
I'm sure they do. Yeah, it's a yearly thing. It's a frequent thing. Yeah, for sure. I'm sure they do, but it's such a small town. There are not that many law enforcement out there.
Right.
It's tiny. And there's so much area to cover. And campgrounds, I'm not sure even if police are the ones that have to patrol. I think it's the rangers. And like I said, I've never seen a ranger out there. In the many times I've gone camping, you know, I haven't seen one. So, and if there isn't a host for that particular place, and they weren't even in a campground, so there wasn't a host, there's no one.
Yeah, the host I talked to at the family campground there, he said the couple times he had tried to call, they just basically dispatch told him, we don't have anybody in the area. You need to, handle that yourself. Yeah. And he's like, I'm just the host. I'm just trying to keep the peace. Like, I don't have I can't keep law and order in here.
Exactly.
So I was just curious about that. I mean, even the party places that we had growing up in rural Michigan, the cops would still patrol by. I mean, you'd still see them out there. So yeah, I was just curious about that, and also just other party sites, because that leaving at 12:30 does seem so early. It seemed like maybe there was a second party spot they were headed to from there.
Well, yeah, because they move on to Donner and Stampede, where Adventures with Purpose checked out first.
Yeah.
There's a lot at Stampede. We camp at Boca, which is right next to Stampede all the time,
Yeah.
And if you're not in the campground, they're not going to even know you're out there, really, with the hills and the trees and it being so far away from a campground. I don't know that anyone could hear it.
Yeah.
So Vera,
well, the camp host said that he could hear it pretty much every Friday and Saturday, but he just said it was just kind of faint music noise. But the 2 times they had a DJ, and it was pretty loud then when they had the DJ, because they had speakers and everything out there. But for the most part, he said it wasn't really disrupting anyone there at the campground. They just see a lot of lights when they'd go to leave.
If they're brave enough to have a DJ, then they know cops aren't coming out there.
That's what I was. That's a lot of equipment and work.
Pretty obvious. They're good,
So Werner, were there supposed to be rangers patrolling? Are they supposed to have a presence there?
Yes, yeah, because just to collect fees for one. But yeah, there's supposed to be a ranger in every campground, or at least go through there in the mornings and the afternoons. Not in the middle of the night. I've never seen one go through in the middle of the night.
Okay, yeah.
They literally just let it fly.
Yeah. Teresa Haidarian says, I got my license 2 weeks after I turned 16. I did all right, but I was lucky. We all make mistakes when driving at any age. Some get away with mistakes and some don't. Yeah, I think it must be so difficult to have teenagers and that whole process of you give them a car and then you've got to kind of let go. That must be such a difficult thing. And then something happens and they get through it or whatever. I remember after the accident I was in, I was sitting there and I hit my head into the windscreen. I'd shattered the rear view mirror. I had my seatbelt on, but it was one of those old seatbelts that don't go back into, they don't sort of go back in. The very, very old seatbelts. Mm-hmm. And I sliced my knee open in the sort of dashboard. And so I was trying to get out of the vehicle, and I just remember seeing this rainbow-colored liquid going out under the vehicle onto the tar. I remember it like it was yesterday. And my elbow over here was sort of burning because a flame was coming out of the gear shift. So it could really have been really bad. And I think I had a pair of glasses in my pocket. And because of the way that I went over like this, it actually crushed. So I had a bit of a cut in my leg as well from the glasses in my pocket. But when the authorities arrived, I was now in incredible pain. One of the worst injuries, I think the worst injuries I've ever had. And I think it was a police lady saw me, and I think it looked much, much worse than it was. I think she thought I'd lost my kneecap. I even thought I'd lost my kneecap. But it looked like there was a volcano where my knee was supposed to be. And my father was, he thought the worst. He thought, and so when I spoke to my father and I said, yeah, well, I got 13 stitches and I'm okay, he was extremely relieved. He thought, I might even lose my leg kind of thing, just from the description. I remember leaning over and the pain was so like white hot. It was this unbearable pain that you couldn't escape. And leaned over, I could see these fine, very, very fine spaghetti, like capillaries inside my knee. And it was like, this is bad. And I went on to be able to do triathlons after that. It was an injury that's affected me my whole life. Something that happened when I was 18 years old has, in a way, affected my entire life. But I at least walked away from that. I at least survived that. And at least I was able to, I don't walk with a limp and I'm able to compete. But you do think, wow, those mistakes that you made as a young person, even if you survive them, can alter the rest of your life. Definitely has with me. Definitely has with me.
Oh, yeah, I've got 4 kids that are adults, and 3 of them have been in accidents within a few months of when they started driving. And you know what? I won't let them drive out to those campgrounds just because they're so easy to go off the road. There's no guardrails or anything. It's so easy. And the insurance rates for our teenagers are sky high because of the accidents, I'm sure, you know. But I've just taught them to drive for other people because people make stupid mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Leave it to the insurance companies to capitalize on that, huh?
Mm-hmm. Well, it probably says a lot about the statistics for sure.
Somebody
Definitely.
said having no ranges there is crazy. I don't know if it's reasonable to expect them there, like over midnight, like right through the night, like 24-hour ranges. I don't know if that's reasonable, but who knows? Okay, so I want to sort of kind of wrap up. I just want to thank Werner for being here. Werner, is there anything else you want to raise or bring up before we say goodbye?
No, I just wanted to say, you know, this accident could have probably happened drunk or sober. It's very, you know, either way. And that I wish we had somebody to blame, but it's probably just an accident.
So
that's
your view on who's responsible, is it sort of like it's just one of those things, right?
I don't think anybody's responsible. I think it was purely an accident.
Okay. Werner, thanks so much for joining us. It was really good having you, getting a local perspective, taking what Terry knew one step further. Thanks very much.
Yeah, Werner, I wish I had known you a few days ago. We could have teamed up and gone out to look for some clues together.
Well, you guys should actually get one another's contact details, because Terry, you're probably going to make a trip out there again. Who knows?
Yeah, you might have my email. So.
Oh, good. Okay. Good. Good.
All right, guys. Nice talking to you.
Thanks for being
here. Cheers, take care.
Bye.
Oops. I think I cut her off just as she was going on. Yeah. So, I kind of want to just wrap up. I'm also going to say goodbye to you, Terry. I just want to kind of, I don't want to do this for too much longer. I've also got to go to bed. By the way, I did manage to get an hour's sleep just before coming on. So I'm also, the fact that this story broke just as I was about to go to bed meant it just totally wrecked my sleep cycle. And I've got to take responsibility for that.
And today, when you said that you were going to get some rest before the live, then they did the big presser. And I was like, he's not sleeping now. He's watching that, I know. I
actually did sleep through the press. I watched it just before I came on. So I managed to get in that hour, even though I was a bit derelict in my duty. So, but thanks so much you really gave a up close and personal, intimate portrait. You know, somebody said, "Is this poetry?" Whatever. I don't know why you can't be in these situations and feel them. I don't know what's wrong with going to these places and opening up your intuition and opening up your imagination. If anything, I don't know what you think about this, Terry. If anything, what this case showed was a failure of imagination, a failure to think things through far enough, right?
I totally agree. I mean, you gave me goosebumps just saying that. I mean, I think you do need to just stop and think and, pay attention to your intuition. And you know, it was totally different from the first time I went there to the second time, just how I was feeling. And when I was just a couple miles outside of Truckee coming into town this last time, I just had this instant gut feeling that Kylie is close. She's here. I mean, I just had that feeling. And right after that was we're going to find out something soon. I mean, sooner than later, those two feelings just came back to back, and I carried that with me just on my journeys and paid attention, you know, when I was driving up to the lodge, how does this feel? I do think you need to just kind of have that third eye sort of open and paying attention. And, you know, if we had stuck true to that, we had the answer to this immediately, pretty much. So,
yeah. If you think of that photo that became the original sort of almost definitive photo, you know, the one of Kylie in like a black dress, quite an elegant dress, and she's standing on like a boardwalk with the water around, and she's got her phone in her hand. That photo, in a way, was speaking to us. It was that there's your answer in three sort of separate areas: phone, Kylie, water, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
And, yeah. Okay,
yeah, just getting to be there and feeling the vibe and the people, really immersing yourself in the culture is like, that's the way to get answers to that. Answers so many questions. Just seeing what the people are like, the terrain is like, you know, being right there, that answers just a lot of questions just by being there. So, I didn't even think twice about it when this was so close, and I'm glad that some of you enjoyed getting that kind of perspective. I tend to be a little poetic and sometimes too long-winded, but
no, it's great to see.
Different perspective.
It's great to see what I do coming through someone else and you did such a great job, and it's so great having this community, and let's hope that we can do the same thing in future, that someone can who's in the area can do exactly what you've done. You know, be curious, go and have a look, and who knows, you know, you did actually spot a silver object and it could just as well have been something else somewhere else, right? All it really comes down to is search, and go a little bit further than what somebody else is doing, you know, as simple as that. I just want to say, guys, I'm probably going to be on another 20 minutes, not the end of the live. I am just saying goodbye to the guests. It's quite difficult to juggle all the balls. So you guys don't know, it's not the end just yet.
Thank you for having me. It's a complete honor, and it's stepping way out of my comfort zone. So this was all new to me. I just appreciate you all being kind to me.
You did a great job out in the field, and you've done a great job. I must say, StreamYard's not always that easy, and you really did a great job. So we'll probably have you on again. So
oh, good. I passed that test. Great.
Okay.
Thank
all
you.
the best. Take care. Okay. See you. Bye-bye. Okay, guys. So if you remember at the beginning, we were talking about who is responsible. Is it Kylie, Sammy, Mags, Jagger, her mother, whoever sold alcohol? Is it the 500? Now we have kind of come to the end of this whole thing. It's hindsight now. And I want to talk to you about how these investigations should be conducted. And I'm not talking about hindsight now that we've come to where we are now, is how this should have been conducted anyway, right? And in hindsight, should have been conducted that way. So this is what I mean. I want you guys to think about what has just happened. So around about 16, 17 days have gone by, and you guys have just experienced a case that's played out, an incident that's taken place. You've seen how it's evolved, how information has come through from law enforcement, from members of the public, from volunteers, where you've gotten different perspectives, and the whole portrait has been filled in more and more over time. Every day you've gotten more information, right? But from the perspective of the true crime community, I think you can also say, basically this whole case started on a weekend, went over a second weekend, and by the third weekend it had basically completed itself. By Sunday at I think 2:48, Kylie's car had been found, and Kylie's remains as well, even though officially that hasn't been sort of confirmed yet, but that's basically the situation, right? What I want to tell you is, and I was trying to bring this up during this 2-week period, is that it's the wrong approach to go, who's to blame on day one? Is Sammy to blame? Red flags. Is her mother to blame? Red flags. Is this other guy who called in to blame? It's the wrong approach. The right approach is search for Kylie. Do the blaming and the prosecution later. The priority is find Kylie, right? And I think even law enforcement, I think they would admit this, that they got caught up in the whole abduction idea. And it's just not good policing. Although now they will say we didn't exclude it and we didn't include it, the likelihood of there being an abductee was always very, very low, right? So the way that I approached this case was basically you first search the camp, then you search the reservoir. Obviously the ping was there, right? So you're not going after Sammy or Mags or Jagger or her mother or whoever sold alcohol or the 300. You're looking for Kylie, and make that your focus and make that your primary focus, right? And so your primary focus should be search the camp, and obviously quite quickly you'll find out, well, there's no vehicle that is obviously out in the open. Well, then search the reservoir. And that part wasn't completed. A lot of us assumed it was completed. Even the searchers themselves assumed that. I'm not saying searching in water is easy, but that's the first step. The first step isn't an abductor, sex trafficking, after party, drug overdose, whatever. The first step is search, get information, have this mindset, right? Not what do we know, but what don't we know? Obviously, you do want to know. We know that that she likely was intoxicated from what witnesses said. We know where she was. We know what her intentions were, but that's where our knowledge ends. And so start at that point where she was last seen. And I think everybody, maybe even including me, probably also including me, went from that point. So basically this point here, just bring it up. Went from this point where she was to where her phone pinged, and I'm not sure if her phone pinged over here, and then went somewhere else from this point and didn't stay on this point for a little bit longer. Instead, there was a bit of a rush to go somewhere else. Right? Does that make sense? After excluding this point, that is when you go to the camp. You go back to the camp, see if you can find any evidence in the camp, which the authorities sort of did. Then you take the road home, right? Then you go to the possibility of an after party. And there was definitely, I think even one publication mistakenly said that Kylie was found in Donna Lake, which is a lake much closer to her home. Then only after all of that do you start thinking about who was Kylie's boyfriend, who was she, what's the word, who was she close to, or who was close to her? then the next step after that is, could she have run away, right? Because it's not just that she disappeared, her vehicle did as well. And I was actually exploring that scenario when I was dealing with the number 4 clue, which I'll put up tomorrow. And only after all of that do you start, if you've kind of excluded all of those, do you start thinking about an abductor. So let me take you through that very quickly. You arrive at the camp, you can't find it. Then you go to the reservoir. You go through the reservoir exhaustively. If you don't find anything there, then you try and look for clues in the camp. Not a car and not necessarily human remains, but small little clues. After that, then you follow the journey even further. Could something else have happened on the road home? That's something I tried to get Terry to do, to see if she could see anything closer to home. Could something have happened in the last mile or 2 or 3 miles from her home? Bear in mind, it was the same sort of terrain, wooded, dark, uneven, not straightforward to navigate. If you don't find anything there, then you go to the whole thing of after party situation. In other words, you know what she said. She said, "Mom, I'm coming home," right? And then she leaves fairly shortly after that. Only after you've excluded all of that, then you start going to, okay, so we've tried the whole route of, could this have been an accident? Could there be an innocent explanation for this? And I think there is. Only after you've gone through all of that, then you start with, is there an after party? Is there a boyfriend or someone we don't know about? Did she run away? And then over and above that, could there be an abductor? And I think it's crazy to think an abductor would go between 300 people who knew each other. Or is the abductor one of the 300 who know each other? You know, it's just, to me, a bit silly. But you see what I'm trying to show you guys is, it's the wrong approach to start blaming people when you don't even know where the person is. First, find the person. So if we have another case like this, do you agree that the right approach isn't investigate Sammy, investigate Mags, investigate Jagger, investigate her mother, red flag the 300? The right approach is look for Kylie. Look at the last things that were said. Trust the last things that were said. Trust that original data and concentrate your search there to begin with. Don't rush out of that scenario to find a person to blame, right? Now, if another creator's watching, and they're in true crime, I'd like to think that they would say, you know what, in terms of investigative strategy, that makes sense. But I would submit that a creator is going to say, look at your numbers. Look how many people are in your chat right now. Look how many subscribers you made during this thing, etc., etc., etc. I made X, I made Y, and I did it by speculating about Sammy and Jagger and whatever, and that's how I'm going to do it, right? Well, is that an authentic way? Is that the proper way? Is that the right way of conducting an investigation? And if you take that even further, if you did that, if you said, I'm going to red flag and cast stones and blame one person after another, do you think you would have found Kylie that way? I'm just saying, if you continued on that route, do you think you would have found Kylie over here? Do you think that's a successful search strategy? So first find them, and then you start prosecuting the case. Thanks, Werner. Yeah, that's also a good point. That's also a good point. Jen says it took so long to find her, that's why we're all speculating. But nevertheless, the jump to an abduction is a very big jump. when we already had that couple that went missing as well. All I'm saying is, if this happens again, the automatic default setting shouldn't be abductor, shouldn't be sex trafficker. It should be, let's first exclude an innocent scenario. And like I said, when someone asked if this is foul play in the press conference, the person who came forward said, we are investigating this. What did he say? He said, it's being investigated as a traffic collision investigation, right? It's not being investigated as is there still a kidnapper out there? There is still an investigation into, I guess, foul play. But what do you think, where do you think it seems to be going already? Now, at the same time, you say it took so long to find out. Well, it's going to take quite a long time to find out about the toxicology. And so you might say, don't speculate. Let's wait till the toxicology comes out. It's going to come out in 4 to 6 weeks. I think you can also use your brain and say, in a classic situation like this where seniors get together, do they get drunk? Is intoxication mentioned here? Yes, it is. Does it look and feel like someone did get drunk and went off the road and tragedy? Yes. So why do you want to make it any more weird than that? Why do you want to make it about foul play, red flags? And I don't think she was intoxicated. Isn't it obvious that everyone has said there was a lot of drugs and a lot of alcohol? Sammy said there's alcohol in her car, and I think she herself said that she wanted to get SHIT faced, right? And isn't that what everyone wants to do? Isn't that what everyone did at that party? So why do you want to make an exception for Kylie? So what I'm trying to kind of say is, in hindsight, think about our investigative strategy. When I say our, I mean the creators on YouTube, but also yours, the true crime community. Should you start off by pointing fingers? Think about Sammy. Think about where we are right now. Sammy tried to organize the search for Kylie, right? And then you say, you know what, I don't trust Sammy. I think Sammy's a suspect. I think about the next time something like this happens, the next Sammy, is she going to want to come forward and do something like this? Would you? Would you want to be subject to that kind of thing? Empath says it's more popular to have a conspiracy idea and creators do that to get numbers. Absolutely. But what I want to do is emphasize to you guys, the audience, do you realize they're doing that to you? Do you realize they are telling you what you want to hear? I don't know whether they believe it themselves, but if they don't believe it, well, then that's a bit shady. That's definitely a bit shady. Okay, so now just to kind of wrap up, I've been talking about this book quite a lot. So if you feel like you've gotten a lot out of my coverage and you're interested in where I get my reasoning from and whatever, this is a great book by Julia Galef. It's called The Scout Mindset, right? And I think of everybody in this, who covered this case, I think those with the best Scout mindset were adventurous with purpose. They were like, they saw something clearly that others didn't. Why? Why were they able to do that? Because they were curious, because they thought, I don't know if you spent enough time thinking about this. I think you may be rushed out of that search prematurely, right? I'm just going to read you something from page 25 of this book. And it's under a section titled Belonging, Fitting Into Your Social Groups. Now, you might think, oh, yes, Kylie belonged to this or that group. That's, I think, the problem here, was that she didn't belong. You might think that Kylie was one of the seniors. That's, I think, the problem, was that she didn't. But that same thing happens on social media as well. You belong to a particular true crime community, and for better or worse, to some extent, your thinking is bound by that group psychology, and to some extent, to some extent it's bound. Even my own subscribers probably to some extent have their thinking molded in a way that maybe not complete. Maybe they need to be open-minded to other things. So I'm just going to read you from page 25. It says, in some religious communities, losing your faith can mean losing your marriage, family, an entire social support system with it. So it's this whole idea of don't doubt, don't be in a state of uncertainty. Be absolutely certain, even if you don't know what the reality is, right? And in order to belong as well. So it goes on here to say, all social groups have some beliefs and values that members are implicitly expected to share. So one of them could be, let's blame Sammy. Oh yeah, I want to belong to this group, so I'm also going to blame her, right? And this is the part I want to emphasize. She writes, quote, to be clear, deferring to a consensus isn't inherently a sign of a soldier mindset. Now, do you guys know that whole thing that you ask young people? You might say, if all your friends jump off a bridge, would you, right? And it really asks you to think critically and say, what should you do in a situation that seems questionable, right? And this is really quite interesting. She writes, if all your friends jumped off a bridge, would you jump too? The correct answer is presumed to be a grudging, of course not. But the child replies, probably. The child says, yes, if all my friends jump off a bridge, I'll probably do the same thing. Because after all, which is more likely, that his friends all went crazy at the same time, or that the bridge is on fire? The kid's got a point. Deferring to the consensus is often a wise heuristic, right? Since you can't investigate everything for yourself. I'm just providing one little thing out of this book that shows you how and why we think the way we think. There is some sense in deferring to the consensus that's out there, because maybe someone does know more than you do. But by the same token, we saw that map. Someone who went and searched, you assuming that they knew something, and there's consensus there when there isn't. And that's why you need to think for yourself. And that's why I keep encouraging my community, think critically. Don't accept information at face value. And that doesn't mean suspect everything and red flag anything. It simply means think for yourself. Ask yourself, does that make sense? Repeatedly, right? Ask that of me, ask that of the information you're getting. And I think if anything, I relied a bit too much on law enforcement in this thing, and I'm sorry that the outcome is what the outcome is, because I would like to rely on law enforcement. I'm sorry that what they did was ultimately a bit disappointing here, because I think law enforcement deserves trust, or needs to be trusted. It's a horrible society where you can't trust them. But what this shows is, I think you should trust law enforcement, but you must also think for yourself. You must also think, maybe somebody else doesn't know the answer here. Maybe I need to make an extra effort here. Maybe I need to do something that somebody else hasn't done. That is the thinking of Adventures with Purpose, right? So that's the one thing I wanted to share with you. The other one is this book, Being Wrong, right? Adventures in the Margin of Error by Catherine Schultz. Now, in true crime, it's kind of all about solving the mystery and being right, being accurate with your lie detection, being accurate with your attention to detail, right? And you don't want to be wrong. You want to be right. But the problem is with being afraid to be wrong is that you start to become afraid to actually think, right? Would it have been such a problem if the searchers spent more time searching in the lake, even if and the thing is, they didn't want to be wrong. They didn't want to search and not find anything. But at the same time, they could have searched and found something. So that whole idea of being afraid to be wrong, one's got to be careful of that. Do you see what I'm saying? KD says, this internet sleuthing created horrible results. In the Cecil Hotel case, yeah. Stargirl says, I don't mind being wrong as you learn something new. Yeah. So again, I want to read just a quote from this book. I see we had 2 hours. I don't want to go much beyond that. So this is from page 179 of Being Wrong, and it's just something I highlighted. Something you might want to read this book if you're finding this subject matter interesting. So Catherine Schultz writes, most of us do not want to be doctrinaire. Most of us do not want to be zealots. And yet it is bitterly hard to put that into practice. Even with the best of intentions, we are often unable to relinquish certainty about our beliefs. Now, I've seen so many people come onto my channel from other channels, and they all say the same thing. They all say, investigate Sammy, or investigate that person, or this, that, or the next thing. You can see immediately that someone who's been basically indoctrinated, and they're applying what they know, what they've learned wholesale in your community, right? And the attractive side to that is, you've now found an idea and you hold on to it, and now you get a sense of certainty, right? You feel like, I know that this happened. What's actually going on is you are just dealing with uncertainty in a silly way. You're saying, I found something that could be the answer, and now my problem is solved. And I also belong to a community because I've made that decision. Well, not really. The problem's still not solved, but you've kind of solved your own situation, kind of thing. Does that make sense? Terry Dean says the poll is currently 57% yes. Let's have a look. So is someone else responsible? 57% say yes. Do you still think that's the case? She goes on to write, so we're unable to relinquish certainty about our beliefs. One obstacle to doing so is the feeling of being right, shored up as it is by everything from our sensory impressions to our social relations. A big part of feeling that we're right is that everyone else around us also feels that they're right and say the same thing. So our relationships with others make us right, even though we're wrong. Then it says, but a second and paradoxical obstacle is our fear of being wrong. True, certainty cannot protect us from error any more than shouting a belief can make it true, but it can and does shield us, at least temporarily, from facing our fallibility. This is the part that is the craziest of all, and that's why I've called this, I've sort of named this show Reality Shift, because the question is, now that Kylie's vehicle has been found, now that Kylie's remains have been found, well, let me ask you guys this question. Now that the vehicle has been found, has your opinion on what has happened changed, yes or no? Let's see, all of you just respond to that. Has there been a reality shift for you now that the vehicle has been found? So in other words, if you were sure Sammy had something to do with this, you were sure there's an abductor, you were sure something like that, has your reality shifted? Yes or no? Bria says no. Ophelia says, I think the option of don't know should have been there. Sorry. So a couple of you are saying yes. It's good to see that I'm trying to find that. Brits Creek says, my opinion hasn't changed. I always thought this was an accident. I've got to say, I kind of definitely went one way to the other. I was about to release my working theory, and it was basically going to be an overdose that was covered up. That was number one. But secondary to that, an accident, an innocent thing. So I was never going to have one. I was always going to have two, but I was starting to lean towards that. So I would say my reality also shifted. But at least I didn't kind of anchor what I thought on one possible scenario. So quite a few of you are saying yes, but there are quite a few no's as well. Sunflower says yes as well. Someone says, I always believed she was in the lake. But this is the part that's interesting, is this is quite alarming, as they say, sometimes when a prophecy is made, so you can think in true crime, someone says she was abducted or she was trafficked, and then she's found in the car, or then you say, well, now I believe even more she was abducted and trafficked. And you say, how on earth do you think that way? And there definitely are people who are thinking that way. And they say, when none of these prophecies come to pass, Festinger found, the staunchest believers in the group grew more fervent in their faith, not less. I find that terrifying. I find it terrifying when you presented with reality, you go into your soldier mindset even stronger, and you say, now I'm even more convinced that there was foul play. I'm even more convinced. And so that is the opposite of having an open mind. That's the opposite of being prepared to being wrong. That's the opposite of the scout mindset. That is the thing where you say, I blame you, you're responsible, I've no doubt what's going on here, etc., etc., etc. That's a very that's kind of a problematic mindset to have in true crime, and that's exactly why you're not going to find Kylie's in a mindset like that, is because you are looking for what you've already found in your mind. You're not allowing the evidence to guide you. You're not curious and open and trying to get information. You're imposing your information, right? Does that make sense? So, yeah, we absolutely hate to be wrong. I don't like being wrong. But when you realize that being wrong is kind of an adventure, and that's when you learn from mistakes. You don't learn from being right. That's when growth happens. That's when you become smarter. That's when you start seeing things more clearly. When you realize I could be wrong, you're on the path to seeing things more clearly. When you think I'm right and I'm sure I'm right, you are already not seeing things very clearly. Jen says the lake must have lit up our headlights only maybe at the last moment, because if you look at this, let's just bring this up. If you look at this, only that last section there, which you have gone downhill, and water doesn't always reflect the way that you think it does. Often when you shine light on water, it's just dark anyway. Ken says, if we find out there was foul play, well, definitely I would say, I've said there's not foul play. I suppose you could also argue semantics and say, is foul play the fact that she was intoxicated? If she drank herself, is that foul play? I wouldn't call that foul play. Foul play to me is a third party does something. I think there definitely is the possibility that somebody tried to get her drunk, or someone gave her something, but in the end, she drove herself into the reservoir. She elected to drive. She was behind the wheel. She drove. So how do you make foul play out of that? And this is where I think it gets quite interesting. So let's just have a look at the poll. 57% say someone else is still responsible. So almost 60%. Earlier it was 50%. At one point it was 60-40. So I want to now cover full circle here. And I want to ask you guys. So let's just ask the 500 of you are in chat right now. If you feel like someone else is responsible, Kylie is not responsible, someone else is responsible, put a 1 right now. If you think that Kylie was responsible or that no one's responsible, it's just life or whatever, put a 2. Let's just see where we are. Karen Davis is self-inflicted, unfortunately. So a couple of 2s, a couple of 1s, quite a few 2s, quite a few 1s as well. Okay, so I'm glad you guys have thought about that and responded to that. And this is now where I think it gets really interesting. When you're thinking about responsibility and you're thinking about Kylie, is Kylie responsible here? She's 16 years old. Should her mother be responsible? Should her friend have been responsible? Now let me ask you this question. We've just come out of the pandemic. That was also about safety, right? This case is also about, should you drive intoxicated? Should you be a threat to yourself? Should you do something and there's a obvious case that you could come to harm, right? We've just come out of the pandemic. So let me ask you, especially if you answered 1, when you were told as an adult to wear a mask, to get vaccinated, to isolate yourself, to lock down, and it was for your own safety, did you listen? Were you responsible? Were you happy to be responsible? Let me say that again. We've just covered this story, which is about a 16-year-old, where we are all saying, talking about who's responsible in this situation. Now I want to bring it around to us and say, we've just come through the pandemic. In fact, we're still kind of in it. And the pandemic has been all about responsibility, your responsibility to yourself, your own health, and also to your fellow human being, right? That's also what it is involved when you drive. If you drive drunk, are you thinking about the other person as well? Or you're just doing what you want to do? Now think about this on the pandemic thing and ask yourself, were you responsible? Did you wear a mask when you were asked? Did you follow those protocols? Or was it all a big moan and I'm not going to be told what to do? In other words, the authorities are almost like a parental figure that are trying to do something, let's say, arguably for your best interest. No, I'm not going to be told what to do. I'm not going to be responsible. Terry Dean says, I'm still isolating to this day. Do you guys get what I'm trying to bring about? I'm trying to ask you honestly about your personal responsibility, and also then make it into accountability. Are you accountable to this question? When it comes to safety, because let's face it, safety can be a drag. Safety spoils fun, but safety can also keep you alive. Diana says, still wearing a mask and social distancing. Memphis Life says, oh, that's a great one. One has nothing to do with the other. They're totally irrelevant. Okay. You really think so? You really think driving under the influence, right, which is a safety issue, and a worldwide pandemic, which is a global health safety issue, are totally... Okay, if you say so. Yeah, I think there are lots of anti-vaxxers out there. So it's really a question that you must ask yourself. Are you a responsible person? Are you a responsible person preaching to this situation, saying that some kid needs to be responsible. Were you? I wasn't that responsible. I think I'm more responsible than most, but there was some moments that I've described to you that were terrifying in what could have happened, and somehow things didn't go that badly. If you talk about when I was given a vehicle at 18 years of age, crashed the one, I didn't even crash it, somebody else did. And then you give another vehicle to that somebody else and literally crashes it again like a week or two later, right? What do you do when somebody does crash a vehicle? Do you just give them another vehicle? Or do you take responsibility? Do you have them take responsibility? So in a situation where it's summer and you want your fairy tale, it's the end of the pandemic in a way, and you want to come alive again, you have the risk of a nightmare. And that's all I'm wanting you guys to think about, is be realistic in your fairy tale. You might think that's a silly or not popular thing to say, but think about that, saying that to Kylie. Be realistic in your fairy tale. You're a senior, you've graduated, you want to have a party. She almost went to a car show instead, and at the last moment she decided, I'm going to go to this party, I'm not going to go to the car show, right? And imagine if instead of wanting to get drunk, she just wanted to have a good time. In other words, be realistic in your fairy tale. You might say, yeah, but that's not going to be any fun, but you might live longer. You might be happier. You might get through life a little bit less unscathed, right? Be realistic in your fairy tale, because if you're not, it could lead to a nightmare. I also want to say the same to true crime creators out there and the true crime community. Be realistic in your investigation of true crime. Don't turn that into a fairy tale as well. Your fairy tale that it's really simple, I think that person's involved, is somebody else's nightmare. Be realistic. All of what this tests is our ability to discern reality, right? Let me say that again. The Kylie Rodni case, searching for her, like literally looking out over the landscape and trying to find someone and something that is there, but not being able to see it, shows our failure, and I'll say shows our failure to pay attention to detail, to know or to find something that is there. It's almost like a test or a trick. Something is there, it's been hidden from you. How good are you at finding it? And the answer is we're not very good. But if you can acknowledge that, that's the first step to being better, at being more imaginative, at being more curious, at being better at true crime. Acknowledging that you might not know the answer, that you need to get more information. Does that make sense? So, yeah, well, I'm 17 minutes longer than I wanted to be, but I'm not going to take it further than that. I've written here, how can you be accountable if you don't know what's real? Think about that. How can you be accountable if you don't know what's real? So, something I meant to do in a different show, but I'm going to do now. Hopefully, StreamYard's going to allow me to do this. Do you guys know what this is? You guys know what this is? It's a pull buoy. You use it with swimming training. You put it between your legs. It gives you buoyancy while training. So it's something I've used quite a lot, right? So a couple of days ago, I went to the gym and I looked in my bag, and this pull buoy that's always in my bag when I go to gym wasn't there. Can you see it's got this little deformity over here, but otherwise it's this. And when I looked in my bag, I didn't see the pool boy. And so I looked behind me and I thought the pool boy had dropped out of my bag onto the ground. And so I reached down and I picked up this pool boy. Right? I reached down and I picked up this pool boy. And then I swam with it. And the thought sort of crossed my mind, is this my pool boy? Or is it another one? Right? In other words, it was a test of my reality. It's a test of, I've swum with this pool boy for years. Is this the one that I picked up? Is this the real one, or is it a different one? Right? And what do you think? Do you think this is, what do you think? Well, it turned out that my pool boy, I'd left it in my car, and I'd actually picked up another one that looked almost identical, but it's not quite the same. The one is slightly lighter blue, right? So the shape is identical. There's a little bit of parts in this one that are taken out. But of course, there are parts in this one that are taken out as well, right? I can't really show you because of the way that StreamYard's doing this, but basically these are not the same. They look the same, but they are different. And when you look closely, they're actually very different. On the surface, they are basically similar, blue and white with some deformities here and there. But basically, they were actually quite different. And so I came out of that situation thinking to myself, wow, how good are your powers of perception in terms of seeing inconsistencies, right? In other words, something looks like something you know and recognize, except it's not that thing. So you have something in your mind, right? So that's this original one. You've got it in your mind, and then that thing is not there. There's something else that's there, and it's asking you to say, this is something else. But in your mind, you're thinking about the other thing, and so this thing replaces that thing. You're not seeing this thing because you're seeing that thing, but they're very, very similar. And that is what I'm talking about, where you are in a situation where you've got to investigate something and you've got to think about something. But instead of thinking about it, you are not being curious. You're not asking questions. And you think, well, it's obvious. It's basically the same. Well, how good are your powers of attention? And obviously, mine weren't that great. I can at least say, while I was swimming with it and on my way to the vehicle, I thought, I did think, I don't know if this is mine. And when I got to my vehicle, well, there it was, right? But what it does challenge you with is the ability to be confronted with something that is almost true or almost accurate, but it's not, and you're able to see that, right? So in the case of Kylie, Rodni, you've got almost all the information. Mom, I'm going home. You've got the ping. You've got her phone going off, but it's not the full story. And then you can't do anything with it. That was really the challenge in this case, right? And so I want to encourage you guys to think about this scenario. Not only where you are the one that is contaminating the narrative, where you are seeing things that aren't there or not seeing things that are there, but also where someone is telling you a story, right? Someone's telling you a story, whether it's law enforcement or another creator or whatever, and you are being too lazy in your own reasoning to think it through a few extra steps. And I do think in this case that there was laziness to start jumping to an abductor. That was lazy, because an abductor wasn't a natural thing to think right in the beginning. And that's something I brought up before the outcome was known. I said, guys, slow down. Let's first, kind of take this kind of step by step, right? Yeah, so thanks a lot for that, Stephanie. Stephanie says, so whose do you have? Well, it belongs to the gym. And so when I go back to, it's not really an individual, so it belongs to the gym. So when I go back to the gym, I'll take it back. I did want to show it to you guys. So I just thought it's a great illustration of seeing something that is almost real and being fooled. And you can be wrong. And there I was wrong, right? The other thing about that is quite interesting is I think there are creators out there and there are fake newsers out there that try and do exactly that. There's reality and they try and pretend something is reality and they try and copy reality. So they will take just enough out of reality. They'll take the white and the blue and they'll present a reality to you that they know is not real, but they present just enough that it actually does fool you. And that's why you've got to pay attention to things in the news, things by certain fakers that they are literally there to fool you. It's done deliberately, and they're using the basics that is going to be enough, the shape of something, the color of something, but then they make little changes here and there and make it actually a totally different thing. Does that make sense? So that's what I wanted to share with you, is that is a way we can improve our thinking, not by being certain, but by allowing ourselves to be uncertain, by allowing ourselves to suspend, to take a longer period of time to decide what something is, and that's not bad, that's actually good. If you think about prosecutions and law enforcement and court cases, they are so well known for taking they take really, really a long time. Look how long this investigation into Alec Baldwin has taken. It's because they're not making their mind up at the first possible time. We need to do the same thing. I'm not saying we must take years, but we mustn't make up our minds at the first possible moment. And as a true crime community, if you see someone doing that, just remember the Kylie Rodni case. Someone's goat. Where's someone's goat? I wonder if someone at the party now remembers seeing a car take the path down. It's a good question, but I think the answer is that Kylie was one of the last to leave. That's the impression I get, is that she left last because she didn't follow the other lights in front of her. You would imagine if it was a convoy leaving that she would have left with everybody else. So she would just follow the lights out. And the reason that she didn't was she left last. And that's also why no one saw her leave. That also does open the door to a possible foul play scenario. It's possible. W says, thanks. Ordering the book. I feel like I'm taking a class and you're the professor. I get that quite a lot. I would have actually loved to be a professor of English, and especially doing English literature and that sort of thing. I did teach English to university students in South Korea, which is quite fun. But I also get that a bit when you cover Van Gogh. Cheryl Kolak says, I thought your dog had gotten to it. Cheryl, I think what that is the paddles that are in my bag, and when you push and I've also got frog feet or flippers. When you push the pull buoy into the bag, it kind of rubs against the rubber and also the pedals, and that's why it's a bit dog-eared like that. Okay. I hope you found this live interesting. The way that I set it out was very streamlined. I found it a bit chaotic because when you have guests on, you can't kind of keep the narrative tight. But I also felt like I wanted to interact with people who were there. I always think that's important, and I do think it was interesting and insightful getting that perspective from people who were right there. Do you guys agree? So I think the last thing we're going to do is just go through some of these images. So let me do that. And we're just going to kind of go through some of the images I've got here. This is from Adventures with Purpose. And there they say they found the number plate 8YUR127. You can actually see the number plate in some of the footage here. Remember 8YUR127. Let's see if we can, 8YUR127. There it is. So, you know, if you're saying, you law enforcement, you're saying, well, we're not sure if it's Kylie. Well, how hard could it be if you found the number plate? Let's go on to the next one. This is just an image from the campground, but there you can see someone going down the road and do you turn left, do you turn right? You know, there's no signposts. At night, you're going to be faced just with a dark or a black foreground, and you've got to decide, do I go left or right? So maybe something that can be done is that there can be signposting and also saying this road ends at the dam. Maybe that'll make things safer. Nick, click on post edits and see the first comment. I'm not sure what that's about. Here's another image of the reservoir. So if you look over here, can you tell where the where that road is? So I'm not gonna, I know where it is, but let's just see how well you've paid attention to detail. Jen Watson says, how do you find time to write books? I don't write books anymore, Jen. And I'm going to try not to write anymore until, well, for the next 8 years. So can you guys, do you know where on this map is this point where Kylie went into the water? Someone says top left of the lake. So you think it's here. No, it's not here. It's not there. So the answer is it's over here. It's over there. Can you see how long that distance is into the water? So she could have picked up quite a lot of speed. You see how long that distance is? And only that last bit is downhill. So you're only going to see the water at the last second. Well, someone says could have changed the license plate. Here's another image of the lake. Can you see where the entry into the lake is on this picture? This is kind of a trick question. Can you see where the entrance is on this picture? So I could be wrong, but as far as I know, it's just off the picture. It's somewhere over here. I think it's somewhere there. So it's actually not in this picture. There's the dam wall. Okay, let's continue. Let's go the other way. So think about these words and what has actually happened. I mean, now in hindsight, you don't want to be forgotten. You just want to disappear. That's exactly what Kylie did do. She disappeared. I have to say, while I was investigating this case, and I think it's going to be quite an interesting deep dive into clue number 4, I started seriously thinking about the possibility that Kylie ran away from home. And I'm just saying I was exploring other scenarios as well, because you had to ask, why would her car disappear? The problem with her running away from home is also, well, why would her phone go off and stay off as well? But just think about those words and the fact that she did disappear for a while. She definitely did disappear. And no one could figure out where she was for a while. This is the opposite side to this just gives a different perspective. This is the opposite side to where the incident happened. You can see from here how steep that last little bit is. It is quite steep. And also that it's somewhat undulating from that part of the road, which I guess is there. It's somewhat undulating. And there's a slight hill, and then it goes down right at the end. So Kylie would only have seen the water, or seen what was in front of her really at the last second, because it was at the last second that the road dipped down. So this is obviously not the Kylie Rodni case. This is the sort of grave site of Gabby Petito, and bear in mind it's 4 or 5 days from the 1-year anniversary. But just think about how the circumstances were so similar, or the optics, the surroundings were so similar. Forest, water, camping, the whole, also a vehicle that was there, and does the vehicle go missing? Were there substances involved in that as well? Think about how it took about twice as long to find Gabby Petito, right? In a wilderness setting, it took about a month to find, what was it? I think it was actually 21. It was from the 27th of August to about the 20th of September or the 19th of September. So maybe a few more days, took a few more days to find Gabby Petito. If you look at this image, do you notice looks like a white object over here? And some people have speculated, is this a airbag? Is this an airbag here? I don't know whether it's an airbag or part of whatever the dive team used for flotation. We'll probably know that when Adventures with Purpose do their thing. I must say, from this perspective, it doesn't look like the windscreen is damaged, but it's certainly not very clear. It also doesn't look like the car rolled on land. That's slight damage there to the vehicle. But to me, it looks like there's something here. Looks like there's something. Is that cracked glass, or is that just mud? So one does wonder, did Kylie put on her safety belt? This is another view of the creek. This is the area where she went off. And so that's the road she should have taken. So she should have turned left, and then I think somewhere there's another left turn. But this is a screen grab from Adventures with Purpose. There you can kind of see the edge of the number plate. What I don't understand with this image is it doesn't look like the vehicle's on its back. It looks like the vehicle is almost got its nose in the ground, if that makes sense. Obviously, it's a very incomplete angle, but the other thing that I think is quite interesting is, to me, the water's not that murky. It's not like, I mean, this is taken from quite a distance away, and you can even make out the number plate. I'm not saying it's completely transparent or completely clear, but it's certainly not muddy and absolutely difficult to see. That's a good question from Jen. She says, I wonder how long it takes to sink. Yeah, it's a good question. There's another one. I think this is a better image. You can make out I've actually turned it around. So in the original image, it is like this, upside down, but turned like that, you can read 8YUR127. There's another one that's not so distinct, but also under the water. Another one. Again, this is where you kind of ask, if so much mud was created going in, why didn't we see tracks going in? Sorry, if so much mud is created coming out, why didn't we see tracks going in? And I think this is quite deceptive. This looks like it's really a flat road going all the way, but this is actually quite steep. This is quite a steep embankment. Just to reiterate what we said right in the beginning, this is not how the vehicle was found. It was found upside down with the dark chassis facing the sky, and it wouldn't have been as easy to see as you see it here. There's also talk that the dam level dropped by about 3 or 4 feet between the time Kylie disappeared and when Adventures with Purpose found it. I think that's the last one. Okay, so I just want to go to the, I don't know if it's thermal or radar, whatever those images were from Adventures with Purpose. Let me just bring that back up. This is another view. There you can see the vehicle covered in a tarp. And here you get a better idea, I think, of how steep this embankment is. Look at how this guy is leaning forward, sort of trying to push it up. But here you get an idea of how steep it is from the bottom where the water is to where this truck is. I've spoken in the previous video about this damaged mirror. Did this happen when the vehicle hit the water, or did it, that'll be quite interesting. Like you talk about ballistics, it'll be interesting from a vehicle assessment perspective to find out when this mirror broke, and also what speed Kylie was going when she hit the water. Again, I'm just curious about that. Is this a broken window? Was Kylie wearing a seatbelt? It could also just be mud. But to me, it seems like it might be going outward slightly. I don't know. Just something to pay attention to. So there's another view of that white object that's behind the windscreen. Again, from this perspective, it doesn't look like there's any damage to the windscreen, let alone, and it doesn't look like there's any dirt on it either. Again, you can also get a sense of there's a slope here. There's a slope here that is more inclined than that part of the slope. Then I want to read this comment. I hope Phyllis Meredith doesn't mind me reading it. It's from, I think it was posted on YouTube, and she wrote the following. It's not Sammy's responsibility to take care of a 16-year-old. I'm a parent and I homeschooled for a long time, so I have a lot of knowledge of homeschooling communities. I do have teenagers and I was a teenager. That's such an important thing to say. What about when you were a teenager and you wanted to drive and you wanted to drink? Her parents were responsible for Kylie. It was her parents who decided to homeschool, and it was her parents' decision to have her graduate when she was 16 years old. I don't want to add to the trauma and loss this family is experiencing, but her parents decided to homeschool, and then they decided to let her go to a campground party when she was much younger than the other people there. Now, that does actually come up where her mother says, Where is it? Where mother says over here that she says, I last saw her on Friday morning and she's going to meet us to go to a vintage car show. But then she changed her mind and wanted to go to this party instead. So I extended her curfew. So mother did have a curfew in place. But I guess her mother trusted her. Was her mother wrong to trust her? And then she says, I cannot believe anyone would think Sammy would be in charge of Kylie. Was she paid to babysit? You do have to let go of your kids, and we have done that here. But it was not like one day they were cloistered and home and the next day at a giant party. Sadly, the ending was what I was really worried about. And now it is time to let go of putting any blame on Sammy. Deal with this tragedy, try to learn from this tragedy, and let the family heal while letting Sammy go on with her life. So thanks for that comment. This is a screen grab again from Adventures with Purpose. It's hard to know what we're looking at here, but obviously there's an object in the bed of the reservoir, and they obviously know what they're seeing here. What I find quite strange with this, I don't know if that's supposed to be the vehicle, but if it is, it feels like the vehicle isn't on its roof. It's not turned on its roof. It seems to be kind of turned on its side, but I may not be interpreting this very well. I think it's also referring to 10 feet of water over here at this point anyway. That's 11 feet, I think, of water. So I don't know if this is a side view of the vehicle. Again, doesn't that look like the wheel on the side? Are these the windows of the vehicle? I don't know. It's just quite hard to make out. This is a map that Terry provided. Let's just see if I can. These are some photos that Terry provided. You can't actually appreciate how steep this is. It looks like it's not very steep, but it is actually quite steep towards the water. There you can get a sense that it is quite an angle. Look how that angle goes down all the way. It's quite steep. So this was the route that Terry took, and this is ultimately where Kylie was found. And you can see at least one searcher went there, maybe even two. At least one searcher, I suppose you could say even three, were there. They were there, they just didn't see. They just didn't see what was there. Okay, so that is it. That's my spiel. Thanks everyone for joining me on this. I hope those who are new to the channel are finding the coverage here interesting, different, if anything, challenging, and also finding the other community members to be kind, sweet, thoughtful, all of that kind of thing, mature. Nan says, thank you, Nick, for your thoughtful and wise analysis. Thanks very much. I want to thank the mods who are here. Yeah, definitely quite steep. The mods who are here, I want to thank the subscribers, the new subscribers as well. Also want to thank those who contributed super chats. Thanks very much for being here and for paying attention and for your interest. I'm interested in making the true crime community better, whatever that means. More thoughtful. I think you can ask the question, do you care? Maybe your answer is yes. Well, then, do you care enough? And I think we can keep asking that question. I think when you are looking at evidence, when you're looking at, for example, just things like this, and you're asking a question, is this one way or the other? Well, do you care? Yes, I care. Well, do you care enough? Pay more attention. Think more. Put more effort into it, right? That's something we can always do, right? Laura Bell says, thanks, great as always. Your reporting is classy. I think you're from South Africa. Cool. Okay. Bria says, massive thank you. Bria, I'm letting you go at 10 to 1 in France. I hope you have a good night's sleep. Cool. Thanks a lot, Pamela. Okay, guys, it's been good seeing you guys here. Timmy is also wanting me to, I think, get off. So our thoughts just once again are with Kylie, you know, someone who was young, beautiful, intelligent, and didn't deserve this. You know, not that anybody deserves to die. I don't think anyone deserves to die, but especially someone at the start of their lives just is so tragic. It's almost like the Gabby Petito story, another chapter. Doesn't it feel that way? And so reality has obviously shifted for her family. I think to some extent for the community there, you know, if there was hope that she was going to come home, reality has shifted. And there's a cautionary tale to take out of this in terms of questions about responsibility, driving, and all that kind of thing, but also just the question of responsibility. And I want you guys to think about that in terms of true crime. Is true crime coverage responsible? Is it responsible to accuse people immediately, to red flag them immediately? And so I hope there is going to be a reality shift where we take out of this that old sense of sometimes something's there and you don't see it, and you're not seeing it because you're not curious, because you're rushing to judgment. Let's not rush to judgment. Okay, guys, thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time.